In Politics Live.
Help is on its way for publicans. Will it be enough to stop them calling last orders? Hello, I'm Vicky Young and welcome to Politics Live. Joining me today, Labour MP Chris Curtis, the owner of the renewable energy firm Ecotricity, Del Vince, and Conservative MP Wendy Morton. The Chancellor is in the Commons as the government prepares to unveil the help that's on offer for pubs. We'll ask a landlord what he's hoping to hear.
Up to 5 million people who are leaseholders will now know that they will never have to pay more than £250, and over time it will reduce down to zero.
Is the government doing enough to help leaseholders? And are heat pumps the environmentally friendly alternative to gas boilers? And we want to hear from you. If you have any thoughts on those stories or questions for our panel, we want to hear your voice. You can get in touch using the details on screen now, and we look forward to hearing from you. Now, the government has announced that ground rent, that's the amount that leaseholders have to pay to freeholders, is going to be capped at £250 a year in England and Wales from 2028. Tell us more about this, Chris. Why has the government decided to do this and what's it going to involve?
It was a really, really positive announcement. Governments have been talking about doing this for decades. And finally, the previous government promised to do it, didn't get it across the line. We've finally managed, or have now set out the process to get it across the line. Millions of people across this country live in leasehold flats. And quite often they feel like the freeholder has no accountability. They can charge them what they like. They can whack up their ground rents whenever they like. There's management companies that are completely out of control. And so despite the fact that they've done everything right, they've saved up the money, they've bought their own house, they've sometimes faced so many difficulties having done so. And what we're doing through this process is capping the ground rents so that they can't see those extortionate rises. But that's only part of the process. We're also looking at the wider problems facing leasehold, including with those management companies, so that just like everywhere else in the world, leaseholders can have the security in the home that they deserve.
I mean, there was some pushback from the Treasury and obviously from freeholders. There was a bit of a delay to these reforms being announced, and some worries that pension funds have invested in this, quite a lot of money, in fact, and they're worried about that.
Look, we've been talking about this for decades. The Conservatives promised to do it. We've promised to do it in our manifesto. If pension funds didn't see this coming, if a pension fund manager didn't see this coming, they shouldn't have been in their job,
Wendy.
to be quite frank.
You know, it was under the Conservatives, the last government, that we started to do a lot of the reform on leasehold. Obviously, an election came along towards the end of that. So I do welcome the news about today. But the issue here is there are leaseholders up and down the country, and it's not just apartment blocks, it's houses as well on some of the newer estates, that are facing a huge amount of challenges because of service charges, many more areas that actually desperately need reform. And what we've seen today is an announcement on one tiny bit of reform. There's more that this government needs to do. Why are they not? Why are you not pushing forward with that? We were promised another bill on this to fix these problems. We still haven't seen it. It just feels a little bit like it's the backbenchers again pushing to try and get a positive announcement from the government.
What do you have a view on whether this is a good idea?
Oh, it's a brilliant idea. I mean, it should have been done a long time ago, as Chris says. I know the Conservatives looked at it. It's interesting to hear that Labour haven't done enough from the party that didn't do anything. I have to say.
That's not true. We actually did a lot to start the leasehold reforms.
I think I live in a leasehold place, actually, so this might affect me. I only just realised that while we were talking about it. But look, 5 million people are paying more money than they should. These charges are going up by inflation, or they're doubling every few years. And it's great that it's coming to an end, along with a bunch of other things that Chris alluded to but didn't quite get to the detail of. I don't mean that in a distant way, but yeah, I can see. I've read about it.
Service charge absolutely needs to be sorted out.
Well, actually,
time again.
Can I put that point to you? Because we've had, obviously, we've had some comments about all of this. It's a big issue for lots of people. Shelley Chambers from Gillingham has been in touch, and she says, capping ground rent is only part of the issue with leasehold flats. The unlimited service charges that can be applied by managing agents mean leaseholders can be charged thousands with limited accountability for the managing agents. Is there something that you're going to do about that?
Yes, there is. There's a consultation out, and this government, I hope, and will be pushing on them to
when?
respond to it. I get later this year, hopefully. I get many of these problems. And we've already started to implement many of the measures from the acts that the Conservatives passed under this government. So we've already started to make progress. But I agree, I have real problems in my constituency with some management companies who I won't name who have acted completely irresponsibly, charging residents for gates, for facilities that have been broken for years, and they never seem to get around to fixing. So there's an entire system that we need to fix. Let's not pretend it's simple, because if it was, you'd have done it. But we've started the process,
but what we're seeing
and
today
we
is
are
only
determined to
one
continue
tiny
to
thing,
do
which,
so.
whilst welcome, I think it would have been
It's
really
not one
good
tiny thing.
if
With
we'd-
respect,
if
it's
we'd-
not one
if we'd
tiny thing.
seen some movement and some and a sense of a timeline as to when you're going to come back with details on service charges, because a review, a consultation, people out there are feeling the pain of having to pay what are often really
Chris, so
extortionate
it's not
charges.
part of this bill, is it?
No, it's not.
It's not currently part of this bill.
No.
Look, we've
But
got...
can you tell Shelley
When?
that, yes, there's help coming?
I am determined to keep pushing the government to move fast and far on this. We have many of those managing agents in front of the Housing Select Committee, which I sit on next Tuesday, and also we'll be doing pre-legislative scrutiny of this bill and raising many of these issues, because you're right, ground rents is an important part of this. And after years of inaction, I'm proud to be part of a government that is doing something about it. But we also have this real problem with management companies in leasehold and in freehold estates. And we need to ensure that it is a properly regulated industry that is working as it should be, and it isn't at the moment.
OK, now the BBC understands that around 50 Labour MPs have written to the Prime Minister saying that they are objecting to the decision to prevent Andy Burnham from standing in a by-election that could have seen him return to Westminster as an MP. There's been quite a row about this. Now, the person who's in charge of the National Executive Committee, they're the ones who make the rules in the Labour Party, is Shabana Mahmood. She's also the Home Secretary, of course, and she's been speaking to Five Live's Matt Chorley, who joins us now. Matt, tell us what she had to say about all of this.
Yeah, normally Shabana Mahmood is not afraid to say what she really thinks. She is trying to be studiously impartial on this. She didn't vote in the debate, in the meeting on Sunday, where Keir Starmer and others voted to block Andy Burnham. But this letter that you're talking about, signed by 50-odd MPs, has been sent to her. So I asked her what her response was to the suggestion that it was a mistake to block Andy Burnham from standing in the by-election.
But even though the result was pretty all but unanimous, there was only one vote in favour, the debate was actually very respectful, and it was a finely balanced judgment for most of those members on the NEC officers group. People really recognise Andy's strengths as a politician. I recognise his strengths as a politician, but people felt that in the context of a big set of elections that are already happening in May, adding on potential other elections as well, organisationally was not something that the Labour Party wanted to do.
The truth is, Keir Starmer doesn't want someone. So that is that's the defence. They didn't want to have a great big election for Greater Manchester mayoralty were Andy Burnham to stand, but there's clearly some unhappiness amongst Labour MPs. I have to say, I don't think it's a huge groundswell. It is supposedly 50, but that was on condition their names weren't put out in public. And some don't like the idea of the Labour machine, if you like, controlling things so much from the centre. But still the calculation, it seems, from Shabana Mahmood and indeed the Prime Minister himself, is to hope a couple of days of questions from people like you and me, Ricky, and all this will blow over. And that would have been better than months and months and months of when is Andy Burnham going to challenge Keir Starmer from the backbenches.
Thank you very much, Matt. And you can hear more of that interview with the Home Secretary at 2 o'clock on BBC Radio 5 Live. Chris, there is unhappiness in the party. I mean, do you think it's going to increase, or do you think that the way that Keir Starmer has dealt with this is actually going to work now?
Look, it's obviously challenging, and we've got a challenging by-election coming up. What I hope is that the Labour Party comes together and works really hard in order to win this by-election, because we've seen what damage 8 Reform MPs can do in the House of Commons, and I'm determined to not make sure there is a 9th one doing further damage. So we all need to work together, come together, head up there, knock on some doors, and ensure that we win this by-election and return whoever ends up being selected later today a brilliant Labour candidate.
Dale, do you think that the Prime Minister's handled this well?
I kind of less interested in that question. I mean, I don't mind answering it.
Can I do that? Can I start doing that?
But I'm more concerned about this constant talk about a leadership challenge. I think we're 18 months into the first Labour government in 14 years with a landslide majority. And I know that Keir Starmer wants to get on with running the country, and the rest of his cabinet do as well. And I think a lot of this is media-inspired kind of speculation and hype about a leadership challenge. We shouldn't be having it. We're not the Tories.
I think Andy Burnham has stirred that quite a lot, to be fair. Back before the conferences, the Labour conference, he made it very clear what his intentions were. And do you really think that he was wanting to just stand in his by-election to be a backbench MP?
No, I'm sure he wanted to be able to challenge should the right time come. But, politics shouldn't be like Game of Thrones. We had, 4 Tory prime ministers in the last 5 years or something like that. That's not good for the country. One of them lasted a month, We don't need that. We need consistent, strong leadership. We need to get things done.
Not getting that at the minute, though, are we, really? Let's be honest.
I think we are. It's not perfect, but I think we are. I think we're getting better than we've been used to for a very long time, actually.
Yeah, Wendy, some people say the bar's quite low when it comes to leadership, following the churn of leaders that you went through.
Look, we did have one or two, but where we're at here and now is quite clearly there are, numbers in the Labour backbenches that are not happy if they're putting a letter in. And I think the question for me is, what is Keir Starmer, what is the Prime Minister running scared of? Is he running scared of his backbenchers? Is he running scared of a by-election in a constituency, or running scared of the bigger, greater Manchester mayoralty? Running scared of Farage, and all from somebody who I always thought implied or said even that give members an opportunity, and let's be fair about it. It hardly seems fair on members of the Labour Party that you can't put your name forward and even be considered amongst others in the mix to stand as a candidate as part of a fair selection process.
But that's a Conservative approach to governing. Labour has a landslide. Keir Starmer has a landslide, and he's 18 months into his term.
And look where it's got him. He's got a massive majority. But time and time again, we're seeing U-turns. We've had 14 already, and we're expecting perhaps another one today, which will bring it to 15. And actually, the backbenchers are pushing him time and time again. So I don't see this as strong leadership. Big majority, yes, but not strong leadership.
I can see why Wendy wants to talk about the drama, because the Conservatives got addicted to it.
Well, there's plenty of it at the moment.
14 years in government. What I want to focus on as an MP, and when I speak to most of my colleagues in Parliament, what they want to focus on is delivery, getting the homes built that are needed,
but you're not.
Ensuring that we're generating more energy here in the UK. We're doing both of those things. Record drops in NHS waiting lists. Please don't shake your head, because we know that it's true. The stats bear it out.
Delivering on the new
and look,
homes.
when I speak to people out there in the country after the years of drama that we saw under the Conservatives, they want government to be boring again. Well, good news. Today, if you go to Old Oak Common, we are turning on the tunnel boring machine to finally complete the HS2 project to Euston, which was an absolute disaster under the Conservatives. That's because under the Conservatives, you get drama, under Labour, you get delivery.
Chaos is what we're seeing
under the Conservatives.
Under yourselves.
Dale, are you happy with the direction that the Labour Party is going in and has been going in since the election?
I would say so. I think that, there have been some mistakes. A lot of them have been about communications. I think what are often called U-turns are just signs of the government listening, like on pub rates. I know we're going to talk about that in a minute. For example, I think we want a government that listens, and if a government sees that it made a mistake, that it changes course. I think that we could have better communications. We could have bolder policies. We could reform the energy market, and we could halve everybody's electricity bill. I've been campaigning for that for a while. I think that the cost of living crisis is uppermost on most people's minds, and it's the reason for discontent in our country and defections to reform. And I think Labour really need to get a grip of that. Reform the energy market. It will cost us nothing, and it could halve people's electricity bills.
I mean, you're saying you want them to be bolder. What do you think's holding Keir Starmer back? He has a huge majority.
That I don't know. No, I don't think it's backbenchers. I don't think that.
Donors?
I think it might be the civil service. It might be an opinion that these reforms are difficult to make. It could be concern of upsetting big business. I think a lot of Labour decisions are made actually with concern about what the right-wing media may say, and I think that's a mistake.
Chris, do you think that's fair?
Well, I think often you imagine a perfect universe where you can do everything, and given the size of the challenges this country faces, there is a lot to do. But I think we shouldn't distract that from the fact that this government has done a lot of reforming. We've got a big leasehold reform announced today. That's something that we've been discussing for decades. This government's finally done. Drop in NHS waiting lists. The changes that we've made in order to support the journey to generating more energy here in the UK. Finally getting the homes built that this country needs after my generation was completely betrayed by years of NIMBYism in the Conservative Party, stopping us from building the homes that are required.
And how many broken promises
all of these changes, I know that there's more that needs.
months?
We all know that there's more that needs doing, and we all know that the challenges facing this country are great. But there are lots of things in just 18 months this government has done or has started the process of doing in order to change this country.
14 U-turns as a result of pressure placed on a government with a massive majority from a combination from my party and your own backbenchers.
There were U-turns.
And you say that you're listening and you're doing review after review and consultation, and yet still we keep pushing and another U-turn. We've had pensioners, we've had farmers. Hopefully we're seeing some movement on the pubs today, but there's much more to do in terms of hospitality sectors. And those are just a handful of examples. I'm rather hoping you might do a U-turn on Chagos next.
There were U-turns under Conservative governments. There will be U-turns under Labour governments. It is a fact of politics that sometimes during the process of policy making, you realise there are things that come along and you need to adapt to new information. That's what this government's do. I'm proud to be part of a government that's listening and moving things in the right direction. That is better than the previous government, which was chaos, or even worse, quite often, complete inaction in the face of really big challenges.
Dale, you've donated to the Labour Party in the past. There's been a bit of a row recently about whether they should accept more donations from you. It was after a comment you made after the attack on a Jewish festival on Bondi Beach. You wrote after the shooting that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wants anti-Semitism to be a thing. It validates him. And Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, condemned those remarks. Do you think that was fair of him to criticise that? Or...
I think you missed out the first thing I said and the context, which was that on the day of the shooting, Benjamin Netanyahu popped up on media and blamed the Australian government for the atrocity because they recognised Palestine. And my first tweet, the bit you missed out, was to say, oh, it's about that, is it, rather than the genocide that's happening in Palestine. I was making an ironic point. That is much more likely to spark anti-Semitism and attacks than the recognition of Palestine.
So you were upset that he had said that it was the Australian
Absolutely.
government.
I think it was outrageous to say such a thing. So coming to your question, I didn't think the attacks on me were fair. I thought that what I said was willfully misinterpreted by Wes and by Stephen Kinnock in order to attack me in the media. It was about a month ago now. Honestly, I'm over it. And we move on. It's politics, isn't it? And some people do politics like that and some people don't.
Chris, do you think that donations from Dale would be welcome?
I'm afraid I've missed these remarks at the time in the story. So
a lot of people did. A lot of people did, actually.
So I don't want to comment on remarks in context that I haven't seen.
Do you think you will donate? You haven't donated to the Labour Party since the election, is that right?
Yeah, it's a funny thing, donations, because this question comes all of the time. And I want to say that I don't have a direct debit set up for the Labour Party. So the question of am I or am I not a donor is a very funny question to answer. Before the election, I had the opportunity, I had the means to give money to Labour to try to address the balance of spending between Labour and the Conservatives. It was my judgment that the most important thing that could happen in our country was a Labour government, and I gave Labour money to help them do that. I would give money again to Labour for such a thing at the next election. I think that's very likely.
Under the same leadership?
But there's nothing wrong with the leadership of the Labour Party. All of this talk about a new leader is just a terrible distraction from getting on with the job.
Wendy, can we just turn to your party? Because it's not all going well, given the number of people, very, very senior figures who are leaving the Conservatives and going to Reform UK. And yesterday we saw one of those, Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, leaving to join Nigel Farage's party. And there was an email that went out from the Tories. We can see The Guardian have written this story up here saying, Tories say mental health claim about Suella Braverman was sent out in error. You know, this press release referred to her mental health. Do you think that was an appropriate thing to do?
I don't, actually. So I can only say that the person who wrote that should take responsibility for it. I don't think it was right at all. I've known Suella for a long time. We both came into Parliament at the same time. I don't agree with what she has done, but I always say that people are responsible for their own comments.
But you must be worried about the numbers leaving.
Suella made that decision to go, but let's not forget, middle of 2024, Suella did stand as a Conservative at the general election. And there's one thing that I remember day in, day out. I am only a Member of Parliament because of my party, and I was fortunate to have my name on that ballot paper, and I think we would all do well to remember that.
How are you going to win back the number of former voters, Conservative voters in the last election, who are now saying they will vote for Reform UK?
Look, I think we have to continue the work that we have started under Kemi's leadership, and this is about doing the hard yards, doing the graft. I acknowledge we didn't do everything right in government, but I won't say that we did everything wrong either. But this is about rebuilding trust. You re-engage with people, you rebuild trust, and you work hard at that, setting out our values as a party, explaining to people, what we would do in government, and starting to set out that clear direction.
Do you think people have forgiven you for what went before? There were lots of people.
I tell you what, if I can just finish, Chris, I think people were really fed up with where politics was at the last general election. I know that from being out on the doorstep. I'm one of the lucky ones. I got back in. So they do not like the falling out within political parties, whether it's my party, your party, Chris. They do not like that. And under Kemi's leadership now, she's setting out what the Conservative Party is about. We've forced the government into some U-turns. We'll continue to do what good opposition does, which is hold the government to account, because it clearly doesn't like scrutiny. And we will work day in, day out to restore trust with the voters.
OK. Let's look at this BBC News story, which is about the government's UK homes getting £15 billion for solar and green tech to cut energy bills. It's part of the government's Warm Homes Plan, which was announced last week, a significant sums of money. And our climate editor, Justin Rowlatt, is here to talk about it. In particular, we want to talk about heat pumps. Now, for those who don't have them, maybe thinking of getting them, maybe thinking they're too expensive, can you just explain what they are?
So a heat pump essentially uses refrigeration technology to draw heat from the outside air and then release it in your home. It's a very efficient mechanism for doing that. So it depends on how effective it is, what the outside air temperature, 2, 3, 4 times more efficient than a gas boiler. Because it is drawing in energy from outside. So it's much more efficient. The issue with heat pumps, in a sense, is the relative cost of gas and electricity. Electricity is about 4 times the price of gas. So unless you're operating right at the top of that efficiency measure that I've said, you are going to be paying more for your heat pump, effectively, than you would for a gas boiler. So they do end up being more expensive. So when you look at the government's warm home plans, what they're saying is solar, batteries and heat pumps, and that's a way of reducing the cost of electricity for people who have that technology and making the heat pump a more effective and more efficient way of heating.
So you need all of those things to make it cost effective.
You need all of those things, but heat pumps can be more expensive in kind of homes that aren't very well insulated than gas boilers.
And the government is obviously going to subsidise heat pumps for some.
The government's already got a scheme. You get $7,500 if you want to install a heat pump. But you should be aware, if you're thinking of doing it, you may have to make certain changes to your home. You may need bigger radiators so you radiate more of the heat. The heat comes out at a lower temperature than the gas boiler, so you need a bigger radiator. You might need some of your radiators changed. OK, stay with us. Dale, what do you make of this, heat pumps? I think you might have one.
I've been using heat pumps for about 20 years. So I know what they can do, I know what they can't do, and I do object to the fairly general narrative that they can save you money, because that's a very rare circumstance. You do need a well-insulated home, as Justin said, just to break even, just to actually have a heating bill that stays the same. And it's all based on the coefficient of performance. You need a COP of 4 to break even. The national average of all heat pumps installed in our country is 2.8. And at that rate, your heating bill goes up 30%. That's the reality. And against that, we've got the mis-selling, I think, of heat pumps. But in terms of the Warm Home Plan, it's £3 billion to give £7,000 or £8,000 to families that are well off enough to change their heating system for something that's relatively exotic, when 5 million people in our country live in energy poverty. And I would have spent that money, that £3 billion, on 1 million solar rooftops, and we could have halved the electricity bills of 1 million people for the same sum of money.
Chris, what do you say to that? I mean, Dale's someone who knows the industry.
So what I would say is where, firstly, you're talking about electricity and gas prices as they are now. We also know alongside this there is a big government programme in order to dramatically increase energy generation in the UK, either through new solar panels, new wind turbines, also thinking about battery storage and storage, how that can be better used. So the stats as they may be true now may not be true in the years to come, and these heat pumps are going to be in place in homes for many, many years. That's the first point that's worth making. The second one is that, yes, heat pumps, they can offer you savings, but where the savings really come from is in combination with having a battery in your house and solar panels on your roof.
That's where the savings
as well.
really come from,
That's
not from the heat pump.
That's where the bigger savings, the combination of the three of those things. And my parents got it put in recently, and they've now started to notice the benefit. My stepdad has taken up baking bread as a way of, so he's got free bread out of it as a way of managing his energy usage as well, and that shows. It does show the kind of benefit you can have in terms of savings, and I think 90% of people who have a heat pump installed are satisfied with the service that heat pump's given them. So there is,
and there's a big problem now.
I care about the future. I'm not going to apologise for that.
There's a problem now with people paying their bills. Every time the bill comes through the door, I don't know anybody who says my energy bill has gone down. With your government, another promise you bring energy bills down. That hasn't happened at all. For every time the temperature drops, there are people at home who are still struggling.
With respect, we've already introduced a policy which will kick in soon to take £150 off energy bills. But
energy bills are £300
on your more general point, I shouldn't care about the future because there's a problem now. That's what got us into this mess.
No, it's
That's
not.
what got us into this mess.
No,
the Conservative Party
you were
could
not
have
talking about
please
the
let me
here
finish.
and now.
Please let
You
me
were
finish.
only talking
The
about
Conservative
one time.
Party could have been investing in energy generation in the UK, building nuclear power stations in the early noughties. They decided not to do so. Because of that, we became reliant on foreign fossil fuels, and that meant when the war in Ukraine kicked off, people's energy bills went up. So yes, there are things that we need to do to care about the short term. We've done some of those things. But the only way of ending the energy crisis is not the short-term thinking we saw from the Conservatives, but investing for the long term.
You've done
so
some
we've got energy
research on
generation
this.
here in the UK.
The Times have written this up, if you have a look at this headline. Heat pumps are more expensive to run than boilers, report finds. 2/3 of households with heat pumps, which cost about £13,200 to install. So they cost more to operate because they use electricity, as you were saying, Dale. So what is the answer here, do you think?
Well, 2/3 said the bills had gone up. 85% said they had either gone up or they couldn't see a difference, and 15% said they'd come down. And that's pretty much the reality. It's a rare case where a heat pump can bring your bill down. From my perspective, it's only about value for money. £15 billion, I welcome it being spent on green energy, on lowering people's bills. The biggest rate of return we get is from solar panels. They're the most economic. Second is a battery. And third is a heat pump. Yes, if you put them all together, you can see combined savings, but you get much more if you just focus on solar. And for £15 billion, we could have solarised 5 million homes in Britain. And that's what I would have done.
Justin, in terms of the long term, Chris, they're talking really about this is a long-term aim, isn't it? What is the timescale here in terms of those returns starting to come through, if you like?
This is,
the great unknown.
Yeah, I'm going to sound like I'm evading your question, but it's really difficult to assess because the price of electricity and obviously gas depends on the price of gas, and that's variable, depends on world markets. So it's hard to say, and it's hard to say in that context whether the investments we're making now or companies are making now in the North Sea building offshore wind farms will be cheaper or more expensive than gas prices, because of course we don't know gas prices. But the long-term trajectory, the government argues, will be lower prices and obviously get us off the insecurity of flexible prices. The Conservatives say, rushing to build wind farms in the North Sea will lock people into higher prices because the price, relatively speaking, is quite high at the moment, with inflation and, the cost of steel and buying things from abroad. So.
There's an important point in there, if I might just jump in, which is that we allow the price of gas to set the price of the wind and the sun in our country. And so we can't have the real benefits of green energy until we break the link. And that's one of the big reforms that I was talking about earlier, break the link.
Yeah, so how do we do that? I mean,
it's
people say this all the time sitting there. How do you do it?
It's ever so simple. Every day there's an auction for generators to bid to be on the grid, and National Grid accepts the lowest bid first until it gets the capacity it wants, and then it pays everybody the highest price, everybody. If you got paid what you bid, we would change that completely. And it's worth a fortune to our country.
OK, we've had some viewers who have got some questions. Simon in London, local government are doing everything they can to block them. He's talking about heat pumps. Planning permission and approval constraints make it difficult or impossible to install heat pumps in some areas. Is that happening, Justin?
It is, yeah. Well, there are restrictions on how close you can put a heat pump to a neighbouring home. So, yeah, there are some limitations on where you can put heat pumps. And there are homes that aren't suitable for heat pumps. I mean, lots of flats, for example, you couldn't have heat pumps outside, on a block of flats, for example. So there are limitations to how the technology
Simon,
can be.
what do you say to that? Sorry, not Simon. What am I talking about? Simon, is Simon here? Chris?
There's lots of planning rules in this country that are completely bonkers, and we need to start changing them. And I think this is a very good example. We have started changing them. We need to continue to, and this is a very good example of one of them. If we want to bring down people's bills, build more energy generation, build more homes in the UK, allow people to put things like heat pumps on their homes, we need to ensure that we've got a planning system that supports that. We didn't inherit one. We need to change it so that it can achieve those aims.
Do you think this is an issue?
Well, I think they are noisy. Like I say, I've been using them for 20 years. I know they're noisy. And I think it is important in a built-up environment that people can have some relative peace and quiet from neighbours' outdoor technology that's making noise. There's a balance to be struck here. I don't know if the current rules are holding back heat pumps unnecessarily. Part of the problem is we don't have a national plan for how we decarbonise home heating. Heat pumps were touted by Boris Johnson as the answer, the national rollout of heat pumps. We're currently on course to take 500 years to achieve that. But 20% of our homes can never have a heat pump. They're tower blocks and stuff like that. And another 20% need major intervention. So that's not the answer. The answer is a mixture. 40% heat pumps, 40% green gas, keep the gas grid that we have and put green gas into it, like we do electricity.
Can you explain what is green gas?
Yeah, green gas is methane, just like fossil gas, but it's made from organic material that's broken down under anaerobic digestion. So it's identical to fossil gas. Okay. It goes in the same grid, it works the same appliances, and we have enough grass in Britain to make enough gas to power all of our homes.
And are we doing that? Is that a sector that is expanding?
On a very small scale.
Okay.
My point is we need a national plan that says, look, heat pumps have a role, but it's not 100%. Green gas has a role, it's not 100%. And then the 20% gap that we have, I'm saying 40, 40, 20, is energy efficiency and hydrogen, which we can make when we have too much wind energy. Just turn the electricity to hydrogen. Our gas grid can take 10% hydrogen right now. All of our appliances since the 90s have been able to take a blend of hydrogen. So there is a way that we can do this, but we have no plan. We throw 3 billion at a few 100,000 heat pumps. That's not a plan, actually. We need a plan.
Chris, that sounds like maybe a plan?
No, I agree with a lot of what Dale said, and particularly this point about, look, we love in politics to have these kind of almost ideological battles about whether it's fossil fuels or green energy or, whether it's the short term or the long term. Actually, the far bigger problem is that our energy network, the way it is built and constructed, the incentives in many cases are in the wrong place in order to ensure that energy is generated and gets to homes in the cheapest and most efficient way possible. And we certainly need to do more to address that as a government.
Do you think Ed Miliband needs to be more pragmatic then? He's being too ideological.
The other point I would broadly accept, Dale, I don't think it's ideological, and that we saw many Conservatives on this. I don't think it's ideological, it's about adaptability. So part of the reason that the maths that you've laid out is true is because we have seen a dramatic and quite unexpected fall in the cost of solar panels. Now, that means that government schemes should probably adapt to that in order to get the most efficient use of government money. So I don't think it's about ideology, it's about ensuring that we can adapt as technology changes with heat pumps and solar panels
well, Wendy,
and everything else.
Does your party think that decarbonising home heating needs to happen?
Well, look, I think what we have to do is, in all the conversations we're having here, we've lost sight of the consumer here. I've got businesses in my constituency who are facing really steep energy costs. We've talked a lot about people's energy bills. We need a pragmatic approach.
Is it your ultimate aim to do this or not?
Well, look, I think that the green energy is really, really important. But just at this moment in time, what really bothers me more than anything is the issue of people's bills. And we have a government that said that they would bring bills down, and that hasn't happened. So that's the one thing that I will keep reminding them of, because Chris, if we were all reversal, you'd be doing that, you would be doing that to me. I'd be the first to also say we do have to have a mix of energy in our country. We can't just rely on one thing on another. And like so many things, you can blame one government, you can blame another. Some of the big investments in infrastructure probably were decisions that both our governments should have taken. Hindsight's a great thing. We have to use suppose
people were saying this at the time. With respect.
Hang on. You know, it's very easy just to say, "Oh, you didn't do this, you didn't do that." This is where we're at. Where we're at today, and I come back to the central point. People's bills are still going up.
But that means that your party would. But you would defer it. You're saying you would defer it.
I'm not going to be pushed into any policy announcements. It's why I'd be in big trouble if I did that. But you know,
But other than saying that green energy is important and we should just bring down bills, but with no idea about how we're magically going to bring down bills, I can't see what it is you're saying that you want to do differently to what the government's currently doing.
I tell you what I really want to see. I want to see your government deliver on its promises. And you promised to bring people's bills down, and that is not the case.
We're doing.
And so, and you can say we're going to do heat. Not yet. So what is the timescale for this? When is the yet? Is it this year or is it next year? Because if you are struggling to pay your bills, you can't wait.
Can I say one thing?
Now.
Sorry, I feel like the UN actually in the middle of this sometimes. but actually, we do have ways to bring our bills down. Energy market reform is one. Chris is right. Our systems are wrong. They raise our bills. But there's one really important point to make. It's not green energy that's pushing up the cost of our bills. It's fossil fuels. It's the global roller coaster of fossil fuel pricing that we tag green energy too, that pushes up the bills in our country and always has been.
Well, let's just to end with you on this. In terms of people watching who are thinking, I want my bills to come down, I want to be able to heat my home cheaper. Is there any prospect of that?
You know, I mean, you have to look at the efficiency of your own home. You have to look at how you run your home. When you buy your energy, could you put solar panels on your home? I mean, they're right. Solar panels are cheap technology. You do get cheap energy from them. Married to a battery, you can start, you know, kind of selling back to the grid, and you can make money that way. And of course, should you wish to, you could power a heat pump. So, you know, you kind of look to your own home, and you know, an insulation obviously is something you should consider.
OK, Justin Rowlatt, thank you very much for coming in to talk to us about all of that. Now, as we said earlier in the programme, Rachel Reeves is about to set out a support package for pubs. We think it's worth about £100 million. It is, though, according to the Telegraph, set to be temporary. The package is to help the industry, will be announced today, but figures fear financial support will not permanently solve the crisis. We're joined by publican Ian Hoskins, who runs 4 pubs across Liverpool. Thank you for speaking to us today. Can you just start by telling us what's been the impact over the last few months on your businesses because of the changes that have been made by the government?
Sure. So, I mean, the national insurance hike for employers was probably the biggest challenge that we had, which was off the back of 3 or 4 very, very difficult years with Brexit, COVID, cost of living, energy prices. Incredibly difficult to keep going, to be honest, because you have a completely shifting set of circumstances that once you get over one, you have another. So the rates, which I think all thought when Labour were coming into government would be a full reform of the rates system, because at the moment, a bricks and mortar system, a bricks and mortar business is incredibly hard to run with all the challenges that we're currently facing.
So what would you like the Chancellor to announce this afternoon?
So the package would be very welcome. The question that I've got is what defines a pub? I think you've got many colleagues in the sector. I mean, we've got cafe bars, bar restaurants. Where do you make that distinction? Is it where someone comes in for a drink? What happens with music venues? It's very difficult. Obviously, you know, a pub can take many forms these days. So for us, we don't know whether that is going to be just our traditional wet-led pubs or whether that'll be food-led, whether it would be places that are mixed. And I think that's very difficult to know because each of those types of businesses have huge challenges, particularly food-led businesses as well. So, yeah, the first question essentially would be, what defines a pub? Are we going to get real business rates reform going forward? Because while intervention is great on a temporary basis, we need to know what happens with our future as an industry.
OK, Ian, stay with us. Chris, what's a pub?
I wasn't expecting that question.
No, this is going to be the issue, isn't it?
On the specifics, I haven't seen the statement that we're going to get in 45 minutes' time, so I'm sure we will hear details from there about the changes.
But there are people, colleagues of yours, they do want wider
required.
support for the hospitality industry as well as pubs.
Look, I think it's important to set out what's happened here. Obviously, we need to revalue the price of property every few years. That happened regularly under the Conservatives. It's happened under this government as well. If you don't do that, you end up in ludicrous situations like we have in council tax, for example, which was last revalued before I was born. We don't want to do that with business rates, and you end up in situations where, Buckingham Palace is taxed less than the homes in the north. So we don't want to do that with businesses. You do need to revalue it. Unfortunately, the last time these valuations were done was coming out of the pandemic, and property prices were very quirky then. So people ended up in slightly quirky rates where houses were particularly expensive. A lot of our high street shops, which were closed, were particularly low. We're revaluing it again, and obviously there's been some adjustments which are causing problems now. Obviously, that it's the right thing to do that revaluation process for the reasons that I've said, but obviously that creates challenges, and we need to work out how we mitigate against those in the short term. Now, in the long term, I do think that we need to look more at our business rates system. Actually, I think it should be devolved. I don't think we should be setting business rates policy as a national government. Councils, like devolved authorities, should be looking at how they do this in their local area because they know what's best. We love to think in Westminster we know what's best, but actually,
why wait?
We don't always.
Did the manifesto not say you wanted to reform?
It's complicated and difficult to do changes like that. And secondly, what I would say, particularly to publicans, is quite often we charge the tenant for business rates. Well, guess what? Why don't we charge the owners instead? Because the argument against the discounts that have been helping the hospitality recently is if you do that over a long period of time, what ends up happening is the landlord puts that into rents, so it ends up just leading to rents going up. So that's why you don't want to have those kind of discounts over a long rate of time. But if we go through those kind of changes and we put it into the landlord's hands instead, it can improve the situation.
Ian, does that sound like a plan to you?
For many of these companies?
Not really. We own the freeholds for a couple of our pubs, so that doesn't really help. As I said before, the bricks and mortar challenges, compared to a lot of other businesses, are just so overwhelming. We're at risk of every little kind of market correction, from energy rates to minimum wage. So for us, it can't come soon enough for a real fresh look at how business rates are calculated, because I think we're disproportionately affected, along with how VAT is charged compared to our European counterparts as well.
Okay, I'm just going to ask Wendy, what's your party's policy on?
Well, on this particular area, I think, Eileen, I'm waiting to see what the Chancellor is going to say, and then we will respond. But it does feel like it's too little, too late, and we're talking about the pub sector. We're not clear what the definition of a pub is going to be, has been indicated today. There are many other elements to the hospitality sector that are also feeling the real pain. And this comes on the back of, the increases in national insurance, employers' contributions. We've talked a lot about energy costs, rises in national minimum wage. And we have a government that seems to think business is bad and you can just squeeze a business. You can't do that. Not every business can just put their prices up because then they become uncompetitive or people can't go there.
What do you say to this?
Yeah, thank you. I think the high street is struggling. Bricks and mortar, as Ian says, is struggling. I think online retailers have a free pass. You get people like Amazon that dominate retail in our country. They pay no tax here. I think that's wrong. When Europe moved to have a digital sales tax, Donald Trump moved against them. We shouldn't allow that. But I think more fundamentally, we need a reform of our tax system because the burden is falling on those with the least. We need a wealth tax. We need to acknowledge that 20,000 people in our country have more than £10 million. And if we implied a 2% tax on that wealth, we'd raise £26 billion a year.
Would you pay a wealth tax?
Yes, I advocate for it. And then we could lift rates on the high street and we could do all kinds of great things with that money. There's not a shortage of money in our country. It's concentrated in a few hands and everybody else is struggling.
OK, I'm just final word to Ian. Just what are you feeling about the next few months, Ian?
Well, it's tough. I mean, we're talking here at the very end of January, where we've had dry January, and you've been encouraged not to drink and not visit the pub, which is traditionally a very, very tough month for hospitality, as is February as well. So,
we'll get you back in a few months' time to see how it's
Ban dry January.
gone.
Is that what you're saying, Ian?
Thank you to all my guests today. I'll be back tomorrow at 11:15.
We scroll.